Morning, everybody. Welcome to NHS Direct, NHS Trust Board meeting. As people who attend the meetings normally will know, we also stream this meeting online. And with the people online, please, if they have a few moments, please feedback forms so that we can learn how to do this better. As I sometimes remember to say, this is a meeting, not a performance. We do our best to give people listening online a good and clear experience, but actually it's a business meeting and needs to be regarded through that lens. We have a few apologies for absence today for various reasons. So one person who might appear to be an absentee but isn't is our Medical Director, Brian Gaffney, who's been held up in Northern Ireland and is with us on the phone. Hello, Brian. Morning.
Oh, hello, Joanne. Thank you. Yes.
Good to have you with us. The next apology is from our Chief Executive, Nick Chapman. In Nick's nearly 3 years with NHS Direct, this is the first board meeting that he hasn't been at. It's the first time I sat in this chair without Nick on my right hand, but I'm sure Trevor Smith, who's Finance Director and Acting Chief Executive, will be more than adequate substitute, although it's not that we don't miss Nick, of course, and if he does happen to be watching on his holiday, our message is go and have a holiday, Nick.
Yes, quite.
We also have apologies from Stephen Duncan, non-executive, who's on holiday also, and from Keith Gate, who's our Chief Operating Officer, who's not very well. So, Trevor, I think you're going to take the operational issues today as well as the financial. Thank you. Sarah Field is with us. She's looking after risk following a change of personnel on that front. And we have had no declarations of interest about today's agenda. Any to come? No, that's fine. Well, let's then move straight on to minutes of the December board meeting. Are there any matters of accuracy? Peter.
Accuracy. Yes.
Accuracy.
Well, under 10.1.
Yes.
It says we've either got Sue apologising or being here. So,
Sue.
yes, she apologises under
yes,
1.1.
that's right.
Yeah. And as her she presented, which is a miracle.
One of the many.
Many admirable qualities.
It's impressive.
Okay, so I think you were admirably deputised for on that occasion by Tricia. Thank you, Peter, very well about it.
I read that as well.
I missed it. Okay.
Other than that.
Any other matters of accuracy? All right. Let's then go on to the action log, which captures our matters arising that haven't already been dealt with since the last meeting. Okay. It's an interesting point, actually, that the way that the action log is written is not always 100% clear, because we've got an agenda item and an action point, and sometimes the action point doesn't refer to the issue that is being discussed. So the one that I had particular difficulty with was 11B 120 corporate performance. The whole process was being reviewed in line with the RCGP toolkit. Well, that was the process for call review, Tricia. That's what we're talking about there. Yeah, and you're going to give some feedback on that when we come to the Clinical Governance Committee.
Correct.
Meeting. Okay, that's great. So that was one of our amber items. A couple of other points where we're going to get verbal feedbacks, Trevor.
Yes, I'll provide those updates. The first was around 111 services and the onward referral rates. The issue is a data cleansing issue around dispositions of service, and in fact we are seeing greater levels of completion within NHS Direct. So that was an in-month variation. Those numbers for prior months will be restated and fully reported to board next month.
Okay. So it's a comparability issue.
It is, that's correct.
Okay.
Second item was around consultations, and on that I'm reporting that operations are looking to centrally collate into a consistent format, and that will be happening during February.
Okay. Are there any other points or questions on the action log today? Okay, fine. Let's move on then to my abbreviated engagement report, which I'm afraid is even more abbreviated than it looks because I didn't manage to get to the mental health event. So most of my stuff has been internally facing over the last month. Happy to take questions, otherwise we could move on. Fine. Let's move on then into the performance section of the agenda with the Chief Executive's report, which Trevor is going to give us today.
3 items to report that we've got noted within this section, plus a further 4th one I'd like to add and ask Tricia to give us an update on Care Quality Commission registration fees and also the recent visits and inspection we've received. But firstly, a report on Christmas performance. A very busy period for us with 63,000 calls being answered across the 4 busiest days and 133,000 uses of our online health and symptom checkers across that time. An overall significant improvement in terms of performance from last Christmas, I'm pleased to report. And we had something like 99% of patients with most urgent needs being dealt with in less than 20 minutes, and around 50% of all calls coming into the service were able to be closed and dealt with by us directly, so not receiving any onward referral. So a very positive performance, and I'd like to place on record all of our thanks to the staff concerned with making that possible. Secondly, an update on Our Future workforce roster updates, and I'd like to ask Roger to take that further.
Thanks, Trevor. Colleagues will be aware that we're entering the most difficult phase of the Our Future Workforce programme, and that's the implementation phase. And we have now allocated rosters, and we've allocated rosters, first choice rosters, to 79% of our frontline staff. But of course that leaves about 1/5 of our frontline colleagues without their first choice roster, and we're working through that process now, and that will take place over the next few weeks. Colleagues will probably probably be aware that the RCN put out a press statement towards the end of last week critical of NHS Direct for the work they're doing on the Our Future Workforce. We rebutted that press statement almost immediately. There were 2 or 3 articles in the printed press over the weekend, but it wasn't. There was a bit of press on Saturday, but it wasn't picked up on Sunday. And we will continue with the implementation process because it's very important that we do.
Yes, I agree with that. I've got a comment I'd like to make. First of all, Trevor James.
Yeah, when I read the RCN statement, I wasn't sure it was quite as critical. I think it raised a number of important points about the difference between the current NHS Direct service and the 111 service, which I think are issues which probably concern a number of people around the board table, about the lower levels of patients being referred on to, at least higher levels being referred on to the rest of the NHS from the current service, where in fact NHS Direct treats more than half of the patients who call sort of within the NHS Direct system. So I think that's a valid point. The thing that I'd like to ask about was the RCN statement, first of all, congratulated NHS Direct on employing more disabled people than the NHS generally, which I think is commendable, but was concerned that staff with disabilities may be disadvantaged through the rostering arrangements. I wonder, Roger, whether you can just brief us on that.
We're very clear that we have obligations under equality legislation, and we will fulfil those obligations through this roster allocation process. That's all I want to say on that we will fulfil our obligations.
Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to check with you, Roger. I mean, I think the staff side have an opportunity to contribute to the implementation plan. They are part of the process. They're on the group that are carrying this through, and I wondered how well that was going, because if obviously if there's a critique made of this by the staff side, well, that's one thing. But I just want to balance it off by knowing that they're thoroughly engaged with this process.
Well, it is slightly disappointing, Peter, that our staff side colleagues attended the implementation board last Wednesday and took the information that was imparted to them at that meeting on Wednesday as a starting point for the press statement they put out on Friday. So I'm a little bit disappointed that a process that I'm not pretending is not difficult, because it is, and I know that a lot of frontline colleagues are going to be disappointed, 20%.
Yes.
But we have been working in partnership with staff side through this difficult process, so it was a little bit disappointing to notice that it was information that we had shared with them that they then took and shared with the press.
Well, I was going to say, my only comment is, obviously they'll decide what actions they want to take, of course, but I was more concerned that there was a proper dialogue going on, and that it was useful and valuable, that because I can see there is a value in the staff side being as part of the programme and process, but it doesn't feel as though maybe that it's as thorough and deep-rooted as it might have been.
We had a consultation, Peter, that lasted 117 days, and that's the basis of the argument around whether we're going to implement this or not. The decisions have been made, and the board made those decisions in November. We're working with staff side through the implementation, but the organisation won't be changing its position on how we have to implement this.
Anyway, thank you.
Thanks, Roger. I would just like to clarify a couple of points if I can. So one about disabled staff and the impact on people with disabilities. My understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that one of the reasons that 20% of our staff haven't got their first choice of roster option is that people with disabilities and with caring responsibilities got first choice. Is that right?
People with disabilities got first choice, not necessarily people with caring responsibilities.
But people with disabilities were accommodated preferentially, and that's okay.
Yes,
so I just
that's
want to clarify that. Thank you. The other point I just wanted to clarify is my reading of the RCN statement. Lisa's here from our press office, so she can help us with this. I think they said that this was as a result that there would be job losses, and it was a result of cost cutting. And that, I think, is a complete misunderstanding of what we're doing, and that's partly why, I guess, why it's disappointing. Again, is that correct?
I completely agree with that. Yes. The rationale for the proposals that went into the consultation were about increasing the number of our frontline staff in the out-of-hours periods, both because our own 0845 calls were shifting to the out-of-hours period, and also in preparation for 111, which is going to be more out-of-hours centric, for want of a better expression.
I would like for us to put on the record again that this is something that we've had to do in order to match our resources with the needs of the public.
Correct.
And it's not a cost-cutting measure.
It's not about cost-cutting.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Chair.
I think then we can move on to the next item in the Chief Executive's report, which is reports on negotiation of the core contract.
Pleased to say we've agreed the key heads of terms with Midlands and East on our contract for next year. And in fact, this re-emphasises and reinforces the importance of the roster changes. We are aiming and targeting to deliver 4.8 million contacts through the core service next year. That's in excess of this year's contract value. It is about maximising the service utilisation, and that will only be enabled through successful implementation of our rostering changes. Pleased to say that we've secured the agreement on heads of terms at an earlier point than we ever have done in the past.
Well done.
We are working through the finer points of detail around it. It will present further challenges to us in terms of our own performance volumes, performance levels, and an efficiency saving of 4%, equivalent to £4.5 million for the next financial year. But I think well progressed, and many thanks to the team for making that possible.
Any questions on the contract? Thank you. I think we should offer our gratitude to the team and and obviously for the also to the team on the other side of the negotiating table, our commissioner. It seems to have been a very productive exercise. So we should be pleased about that. Thank you. Okay, any other just general questions to the acting chief executive? Or any other
just a final point from Tricia around Care Quality Commission.
Ah, good.
Colleagues will remember we had a unannounced inspection of our organisation late December and January, where inspectors visited our Wakefield site, met with staff, listened into calls, and then went to our Milton Keynes site and engaged with our staff and reviewed a number of our other service provision. We are waiting the first draft of that inspection, that report, but the inspectors certainly gave myself and David Ford, the Associate Director for Clinical Governance, a verbal update, and the initial findings were there were no areas of concern, and the quality of the service we are delivering would be as expected, which is of a high quality. Further information I'm pleased to share with the board are in previous consultations the CQC have asked for feedback with regards to the fees we pay alongside other national organisations for our CQC registration. Ourselves and other national providers such as the Health Protection Agency fed back in a consultation that we felt the fees were disproportionately high for us as an organisation. The organisation has taken that on board, engaged with us and 3 other national organisations in a week consultation, which has resulted in a revision of our CQC registration fees, which will be charged for £1,500 for the coming year, which is a substantial reduction from £70,000, and we're pleased to receive that review.
Very good, Tricia, thank you.
Yeah.
Take my breath away.
Yeah. It's a very welcome and somewhat surprising.
Yeah.
Did you say 70?
70 and reduced down to 1,500.
Yeah. Which is presumably a classification issue.
Yes, it
so
was
it's
to
taking
do-
us from one sort of classification type of band to something different.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, I don't think we want to delve too deeply into that. We want to be very pleased, and in particular, more importantly, be very pleased about the positive, informal feedback that we've had in relation to the unannounced inspection. Obviously, unannounced inspections are extremely important. I think it's good that we have them, and it's even better that when they find that our service is of the standard and quality that they want to see. So that's really fantastic, and I hope we will soon be able to feed that back in a more formal way to our teams. Thank you. Anything else within the Chief Executive's report or that you'd like to quiz Trevor about? I'm sure he'd love to have some more good questions this morning. Right. Okay, fine. Thank you then. Let's move on into the corporate performance package, which Trevor will help us navigate our way through.
We had over 1.3 million contacts with our telephone and online services this month. That includes 341,000 patients using our 0845 service, 952,000 uses of our health and symptom checkers online, including our mobile application. We were able to provide self-care advice for over half of all users, so they required no onward referral. And we also took a further 197,000 calls through our appointments line service in the month. We performed well on access targets, with 94.7% of users able to access the service within 60 seconds, and we had an abandonment rate of just 1.6%. Clinical assessment for the most urgent of patients remained well within our target, with 99% of patients being dealt with within 20 minutes. However, we were below target for both less and non-urgent calls. We do remain below target on expert call reviews, and our Director of Nursing is and has been reporting in detail on that matter through to the Clinical Governance Committee. Our patient satisfaction levels remained good at 92%, and complaints were just 0.3 per 10,000 calls. Our financial performance associated with our activities on income and expenditure remains strong. We have a surplus of £2.7 million for the year to date and forecast delivery of our year-end financial targets. We've currently a cash balance of £20.7 million, and we've invested nearly £2 million in capital for the year to date. We're happy to take any questions on the performance report.
Okay, so we're going to take operational performance and financial issues together. Any questions on that?
Thank you, Joanne. On page 7 of 12 in the report, I'm drawn to the middle chart, B17111, calls requiring onward referral. We do seem to have a sort of inflection point after September, where October, November and December all higher than July. Can we have a bit of detail behind that, please? Because I'm trying to perhaps I couldn't recall, but that chart's telling me something that I don't know what it is.
Okay, just to clarify, we're on page 7 of the 12 operational performance and scorecard pack, not the finance pack, which also happens to have 12 pages.
I'm so sorry. Thank you.
Okay, so we're talking about the proportion of calls which were not referred on to other NHS providers. Tricia?
Yeah, okay. I believe the report and graph demonstrates the difference in the services that currently our core service 0845 delivers and the 111 service. We are learning from the pilots that there is a considerable increase in referring to the out-of-hours providers and other urgent and emergency services through the 111 service. So the trend and profile reflects seasonal changes, obviously the winter months, as well as the difference in service delivery from health advisors referring outwards.
Thank you. So it might be worthwhile expanding that chart to look what happened the winter before this one on 0845 to see whether the last 3 months increase are actually real.
Tricia, if I could come in here, I mean, obviously I'm looking at Ruth and others around the table, understanding the profile of onward referrals in 111 service is of great significance, not just to us, but given the fact that these are pilots, to the system as a whole. So there's quite a strong focus on what's really going on under there. And if we could take your point, Tim, to be a sort of more general one, perhaps the board would be interested in exactly what's happening, rather than a specific, shall we expand this chart? Could we do that?
Yes.
And we can look at the difference between onward referrals from 111 and 0845, and within that, any trends or patterns and factors, significant factors driving that. Is that okay?
Yes, be helpful, thank you.
Thank you. So it is a very, very important point.
It is.
Anything else? Yeah, we're rattling through with exceptional speed here. Roger.
In the absence of any of the non-executives picking up our sickness
Yes.
in December, would you forgive me
for chief executive?
Would you forgive me for bringing them up? I mean, they increased during December as is normal at this time of year, but nothing like the increase that we had in 2010. And I'd just like to commend our frontline staff and our managers for the continuing work they are doing to take seriously the fact that we have a sickness absence problem in this organisation, and that progress is clearly being made.
Thanks,
we continue
Roger.
to have a sickness absence problem,
We
but
do.
progress is being made. Thank you, Chair.
That is definitely worth pointing out.
Yes.
Thank you for that. Tim?
Sorry, I had another one, Joanne. On page 8 of 12 of the board scorecard, it's the middle chart again, and I think it's just an observation where we see in long-term conditions, and we know that recruitment has stopped in Birmingham, but we see that patient membership has fallen since April from 10,000 to, well, we're going to be at, I hesitate to extrapolate, we could easily be at 5,000, 5,000 by this coming April, which is, it's a very worrying chart, because it means that the service that the patient membership enjoyed are being denied to them, and I think that's a very worrying trend.
It is very sad, I think. I guess Actually, it's not just a drift down, but is there a managed closure plan?
Yes.
And the service will at some point be switched off.
Yes.
When is that?
So just to be clear, this graph covers all of our long-term conditions services, not just Birmingham Own Health. The major impact is Birmingham Own Health, where we were given notice of contract, which will end on the 31st of March. As we understand it, the PCTs in Birmingham have undertaken a public consultation on the service, and we await to hear the outcome of that consultation. But in respect of the service they commissioned from us, we have been given notice on the contract, and therefore there was an agreement with the PCTs that we would not actively recruit new patients.
Thank you. Very sad, I think.
Is that 31st of March 2012? And does that mean that current patients, our expectation is that current patients will stop receiving the service on the 31st of March?
That is part of the outcome of the consultation, where the PCTs will decide how they continue, if they continue to provide a service by other means.
I mean, I guess one thing we should do in relation to that particular graph is we should separate out the Birmingham numbers from the others, because I think what's happening by putting them together is that we're not being able to disaggregate an expected drift down in Birmingham with what's happening elsewhere. And I think that would be worth separating. Okay, thank you, Tim.
So one other thing is my other lives have paid a particular attention to the Olympics, and I think maybe the board should receive an update next month on what our predictions are for increased demand in that period. And I don't think we've talked about it recently, so I think that'll be very useful to reassure us that we're ready.
Yep.
Okay, good. Fine. Thanks, everybody. Are we done on the performance package? Okay, well, we're still in the performance section. And what I'd like to do is take the two next items together, because they're both, I mean, having welcomed Sarah to the board, just put her straight in the spotlight and say that we've got the corporate risk register and the board assurance framework. I know you'll have to take questions, Sarah. Would you like to introduce it as well? Yeah, thank you. You can do both of those.
Both the public and private risk registers and the board assurance.
Have to shout.
Yeah, you'll have to shout.
Both the public and the private risk registers and the board assurance framework have been presented and discussed at the audit committee meeting recently. The risk assessments on the public register remain unchanged, and these are ratings covering sickness levels, roster arrangements, and our financial duties to break even, and their risk ratings remain the same as last year. Does anybody have any questions?
The audit committee did have a chance to review these. I think the key one is about sickness, and we're waiting with interest the full review that's being taken place by Roger and colleagues, which is due in a couple of months' time, March, which we will fill it through for the board, and particularly come back to you after that, to that next board meeting after that. So we will give you a full report of our views.
So that will be when, Peter? Sorry, so that's
The
that likely
March
to be April?
meeting is, I don't have my diary in front of me. Can you remember?
It's towards the end of the month, so we might be able to get a report.
We'll certainly be able to, if possible, have an oral report for you,
Okay.
Yes.
which I think is right.
That's fine. Thank you very much. Okay.
Moving on to the board assurance framework, there have been two changes to the framework as noted in the summary paper, and the audit committee also received our internal audit independent assessment of the assurance framework and risk management, and I'm pleased to report back that substantial assurance was achieved on both of them, and the internal audit assessors noted both improvements in the board assurance framework document and also the process of embedding risk management across the organisation.
That's good.
I think the audit committee had a concern about embedding the process in the organisation, and the internal auditors have confirmed that that process has gone into place extremely well. I think we'll keep an eye on this one, but I think all credit to the executives for ensuring that in the busy life that people have, this is at the forefront of their minds, because it's very important. And it's things like CQC, registration, all those things come into play with that sort of process. So, very good.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Sarah? Okay. Thank you. Well, you'll see that the next item on the public agenda, which is the strategy item, is 111 digital. We've had a request from our commissioner to take that in private session, which I have accepted. Trevor.
Could we understand why that would be private? My understanding is that as a public body, it is good governance to do all of our business in public, unless it relates to a specific individual, or in a market-driven NHS, there are commercial issues which may be considered confidential. When I read this paper, it's very simple, very factual. So why is the request that we do this in private?
It's a timing issue for on this one, Trevor. Ruth and I have discussed this one. We are being commissioned by Midlands and East, but those commissioning arrangements and the proposal itself have not been finalised at this point. So we would just seek to defer this item, discuss it as in private session, but bring it back to the public board when those final points of detail are tied down and the proposals have been fully signed off.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Let's then move on into the governance and compliance section of the agenda. Keisha, we have a minor change to the register of interest, which people will have been able to see. I'm not sure there's a need to discuss that. We have an item on the lease of our Sheffield contact centre, which I think, Roger, you're going to talk us through. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So our existing security of tenure at Sheffield ends in the middle of this year, at the end of June, and that's due to a break in the head lease that is held by Yorkshire Ambulance Service. So we have to make a decision now as to whether we commit to a new lease or to take steps to close the site by the 30th of June. Our estate's position at the moment, across the whole estate, is that in circumstances where we don't have to make a decision about future estate, then we shouldn't, because the future of our estate is going to be determined by the winning or losing of contracts to provide 111 services. So in Sheffield, our head of estate has managed to negotiate a 5-year lease with a reduction in rent, but which also has a break in June 2013, which is about right for us if we do not know about the state of our estate until the end of 2012-13. So in my view, this is a very good piece of negotiation by the head of estate, and it's exactly the position we want to be in. So I commend the recommendation to renegotiate the lease on this. Brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, that seems like a very good outcome.
Thank you.
Yep. Is everyone happy with that?
Yes.
Yes.
Fine, thank you. You have to sign that off. Right. So now we are moving to the feedback from various important committees. So just to remind people of the process, which I'm sure you're all very familiar with now, we get verbal feedback from the chairs of committees once they've met. We then get the minutes, usually at the following meeting, as a matter of record. So today we have feedback from 3 committee meetings: clinical governance, audit and finance. So the Clinical Governance Committee met on the 13th of January. Sue, would you like to give us some feedback on that, please?
Yes. Most of the meeting was taken up with the core review process, which we'll come to. If I just cover off the other things. We received an update on the NHSLA assessment process and received assurance that progress is sufficient. People who need to be trained are being trained, and there's sufficient resources to make sure that we are in a good position when the NHSLA comes in to do the assessment in May. We received the same verbal update on the CQC inspection, and we had a paper on the clinical governance structures, which we were pleased to see had actually had some additional resource put into it. I know there was some concern from a couple of the non-execs around the adequacy of the resource in the new governance structure, and that's now been amended, which is excellent. We received a service quality review on palliative care, which is on the agenda in a minute, and we also went through the action log for all the other reports on the service quality reviews, and were content that progress was sufficient. The Safeguarding Adults annual report has been deferred to the next meeting, and we'll receive it then. Which then, and the clinical strategy, we received an outline presentation which gave the committee a sense of direction of how the strategy paper is going to be structured. So the rest of the meeting really was around the core review process, and at the last board meeting there was some concern expressed about the fact that the KPI is consistently read on the core review process. So we asked for a presentation on that, which Janet Haslam gave us in conjunction with Tricia. And I think at the end of that, the committee felt more informed about how the process makes sure that the core review process is independent. And we recognise the difficulties in achieving the KPI. And we recognise that the KPI benchmark does not necessarily reflect external benchmarks that are available. The RCGP benchmark are between 60 and 65%. It's substantially lower than the benchmark that we use internally at 80% for good and excellent calls. So we have requested that we consider how those benchmarks are set in the future. Trish, I'm sure you've got anything extra to add to that?
Just we will be doing a thorough review of our KPI in regards and measuring against other benchmarks, and I will report back to the Clinical Governance Committee in future any developments in that area.
Yeah, I mean, I think the key thing was we recognised that the process we're going through is so much more independent than what we were doing even 18 months ago. It's random, it's blind testing, and it is being done by an independent team. So the actual quality of assessment that we have now is substantially better than what we had 18 months ago. And we recognise that there is a continuing push to try and improve our performance in this area.
Okay, that's helpful to know. Brian, I wonder if you could mute yourself, because I think we're picking up a bit of background noise from your end of the world.
Yeah, apologies.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's very illuminating actually. So you've looked at are the benchmarks set at the right point, and you're going to do some further work on that, and the process has vastly improved. Trevor.
I understand everything Sue has said, but I think the critical issue for me is that we should look at the performance management issues as well.
Yes, indeed.
The board did receive proposed targets from the executive, which we accepted. We have had reassurances through the year that we would deliver those targets. Could we have an update on whether we will deliver them this year?
I did look at this measure in November, and everybody was focused on working hard towards this target, and I did believe it was possible to achieve the 80% excellent core review scoring. However, with intensive recruitment that's taken place, the additional training that's required for those members of new staff joining the organisation, the support they require, dealing with the roster options and frontline staff's management of handling those issues. I now believe with a review over the winter period, that's it. I don't believe it would be possible to reach that target before the end of March with our current focus.
Trevor, do you want to come back on that?
No, I think it's an issue probably when we get to the next item, the audit committee feedback. There's a broader issue when we want to discuss it.
Okay.
Will take us through.
All right, well, let's note that then. Any other questions to either Sue or Trish on the audit, on the Clinical Governance Committee meeting? No. Thank you very much. Let's then move straight on to the Audit Committee, which met on the 16th of January. And again, you've got in your papers the agenda, which I have to say, I mean, look at that agenda. And it looks like exciting, of course it looks exciting, goes without saying. It also looks like a very onerous agenda.
We always get excited, don't we, Tim?
Very much so. Very much so.
So we've got the agenda there as a kind of brief, so that we know what we can ask about, and as a aid memoir for the people who are there.
Yeah, just a few things. The internal audit reports, they're always very helpful and important in diving into a lot of the detail of the way the organisation is operating. And in particular, payroll has been one of the areas of concern for many years. But you'll be pleased to know, as a board, that on the various internal audit reports, we did receive substantial assurance, which is the top level of assurance that you can receive, including payroll. There are still some quirky items in there, and they do need resolving, but there was nothing of a significant nature that needed to be reported to the board. And I think that shows a considerable improvement over a period of time. It's taken a while to get to this level, and I am very keen. We the audit committee, are keen that we stay there. So we want certainly the executive to make sure that the management processes are maintained, that eye is kept on this particular ball, but all credit to getting to where we are at the moment. The second thing regarding electronic procurement, again, there is an issue for the executive about ensuring that all staff are familiar with the process and that they are following due process, and that's been acknowledged by the management and the executive, and so there is a thorough training program in place, and where there are concerns, then there is a proper escalation to senior management to deal with them. So that, I think, deals with that. The last thing, which is possibly the most important, is around the compliance issues, which is really around training and ensuring that mandatory training and those parts of the performance management process which require training to be embedded, if you like, in management arrangements. The audit committee had some concerns about this. There were a number of areas where it appeared on health and safety, fire procedures, information governance, and we've heard of the last one that we've just gone through, where a tightening needed to occur to ensure that we were compliant across the organisation. To be fair, we've had a very positive response from the executive, who have assured us that in the statutory areas that there will be compliance by the end of the operational year, and Roger has agreed to undertake a review to reinforce this point so that we can come back to the board, as it were, as a board issue, to know that this has actually happened.
presumably that's important for the NHSLA. I mean, amongst many other things, that's a secondary point.
And I mean, I would say the information governance issue has been. I brought that to the board before. It still continues to be a concern. So that's why we wanted to do that.
Trevor, you'd like to come in there?
I think firstly to say it's pleasing to see some of the positive reports we got from our auditors, but as an executive team we are not complacent around those reports, and we understand and fully recognise the importance of systems of internal control and compliance with those systems. They're there for a purpose, and compliance with those systems is particularly important when you think of the scale of change that we're currently going through as an organisation. So I would like to give the board our assurances that we are clearly focused on compliance around such systems as procurement processes, payroll returns, information governance and training requirements, and we will be looking at that closely.
Trevor, yes.
I think there's one other thing that we should think about. In the private meeting the non-executives have with the auditors after the audit committee, the external auditor had suggested that perhaps we should raise this issue into our risk register. The issue of the balance between operational management and compliance, and the danger of not delivering either, if you like, is the risk. So I think I would be very sensible if that became this issue on the risk register.
Okay, Roger.
Can I just pick up the slightly narrower point about statutory and mandatory training? So I agreed on behalf of the exec to pick that up, and I've taken that back to the executive. And I'd just like to divide it into two, frontline and non-frontline. In terms of non-frontline, the compliance was fairly low, and there is absolutely no excuse, and I agreed with that, and my executive colleagues agree with that, and so there is absolutely no reason why people not at the front line cannot do their statutory and mandatory training by the end of this financial or operational year. And frankly, even though it is more difficult on the front line, and we all know the reasons why it's more difficult on the front line, actually at this time there is no excuse there either, and certainly in the conversations we've had with Keith Gate, Chief Operating Officer, he agrees that is, irrespective of operational difficulties, there is no reason why frontline staff can't complete their statutory and mandatory training by the end of the year either. So that was the commitment that the exec have made. There was another small point, and that was whether there were things that there was training that was that needed to be done for statutory and mandatory reasons, and I've had a good look at that, and I think we've got that right actually. The Learning and Development Steering Group sets what should be statutory and mandatory, and then what should be prioritised, and actually different groups do different sorts of training now, so that if you are quite a long way from the front line, then your statutory and mandatory obligation is not that great, and clearly in other positions it is. So I'm content that we've got the statutory and mandatory elements right. What we have to do now is get it done by the end of the year.
Presumably, Roger, that is even more of a challenge where you have what we have been coping with, which is structural embedded under-resourcing at particular times of the week. So you have frontline staff where there's a sort of continuous, predictable over demand compared with the capacity of staff, and so I'm imagining that rebalancing that as we're doing through the roster revolution will make it a bit easier to meet statutory and mandatory training obligations. Is that fair?
Yes, absolutely. You're absolutely right. Traditionally, offline time has been pulled, as the vernacular says it, in the evenings and at weekends. However, the new rosters aren't going to be in until the end of this financial year, so we have got to be able to do our statutory and mandatory training irrespective of the situation we're in at the moment. So yes, that will solve the problem for 2012-13, but we've got to get this right.
Okay, thank you very much, Roger.
So
Okay.
just one other
Yes,
just
yes.
to reassure
Thank
you
you,
that
Peter.
the external audit is progressing well. I know you'd want to know that.
Good.
And we reviewed the timetable and the actions that were needed, and were assured that there were no glitches in that system either at the moment. So.
Well, again, that's very good to hear, and staff who've made that possible are all to be commended.
Indeed.
Which I know isn't just the finance department, but it's all the other people who are affected by the audit. Thank you very
That's
much.
it, thank
indeed.
you.
Okay, I think then we've finished our feedback from committees, and we've finished the governance and compliance section of the agenda.
You've got terms of reference.
I've got some terms of reference, I'm sorry, lurking deeply in the... and we've got finance committee. Goodness, I am jumping the gun. Right, let's go to terms of reference first.
I know these are boring.
Not at all. I was going to take great feedback that I got lost in the agenda, and it's entirely down to me, and I apologise deeply for that.
We've had a good going over these, and so we bring them to you to commend them for adoption. There's nothing untoward in them or strange. The only thing perhaps to mention is the under 10. We do have the review process, which is to look at other committees in terms of compliance, not the actual decisions they make necessarily, but the processes that they use to go about their decision making. I spoke to the finance committee's chairman just this morning about such a matter, so and no doubt he was saying something about that. But other than that, I think they're hopefully straightforward for the board to adopt.
Very good. So your oversight is not in the heavy-handed way, but is entirely supportive and developmental.
Well, we float
sure.
like a butterfly, sting like a bee.
Excellent. Trevor, you have something?
Just to say, to echo Peter's comments, these have been considered at length by committee members and also by our auditors, and they do meet with NHSLA requirements.
Okay, that's good.
Thanks to most of you.
Fine. Has anybody got any comments or concerns about the audit committee terms of reference? No, very good. Well, then let's move on to the finance committee.
Thank you, Joanne. As it happens, the Finance Committee spent a lot of time dealing with 3 issues that have all of which have some commercial sensitivity. So I'd like to report about those in the private sector. But there's one thing I'd like to just pull your attention to. We were very, very concerned that the interface between the Audit Committee and the Finance Committee worked well. And if you look in the agenda that you've got in front of you, you can see under 8 that we reviewed the Trust business case approval process and we reviewed the Trust's bid approval process. And the Audit Committee, the Finance Committee, I'm making a mistake myself, the Finance Committee was very happy with those 2 processes, but we've referred them to Peter for consideration by the Audit Committee. So I think the reason for mentioning that is a sign that we're conscious of that
boundary,
that's got to be really got to be observed. Otherwise, I'd like to take the 3 other issues in the private section.
Thank you, Tim. We can do that. You'll remind me, I know. Good. Well, I think we actually now have reached the end of the governance and compliance section. We have a stakeholder engagement section to go. I would like to suggest that we take a 5-minute break now so that we're all comfortable to get stuck into our stakeholder issues. So we'll convene again at 11:30. Thank you. That's great. Okay. So we're now in the stakeholder engagement section of the agenda, which is where we tend to look outwards towards the patient and the stakeholder community, also towards our staff. We don't, I think, have any what we call trust board engagement visits to report this time around. Okay. Then we'll move on to the discussion of the call recording, which all members of the board will have an opportunity to listen to. I'll ask my usual question. Has anybody not managed to listen to the CD? Okay, fine. So we won't expect your usual insightful comments on this one, Trevor.
Stop it.
If I hadn't, this is what I would have said.
Very witty for a HR person.
Enough of this.
Banter.
Banter. Yeah, no, I don't mind banter. I think
Just criticism of the NHS.
assumptions, exactly. Prejudice against colleagues from any particular.
I'll survive, Chair.
Okay. I'm sure you can cope with it. I wouldn't want any of your team to feel that. So there we go. All right. Tricia, would you like to introduce this one, and then we can have a conversation around it?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This paper describes a patient's experience who rang our service, our core service, in the middle of the night, experiencing some severe symptoms of renal kidney pain and lower back pain. Went through a process of an assessment with our health advisor and to our nurse advisor. Was subsequently referred due to our nursing staff member understanding our single point of access service with West Yorkshire Urgent Care, and arranged a home visit for this lady in the night. We subsequently were made aware of this call because the patient was so satisfied with the service and the experience both herself and her husband or partner had with the service. They wrote their local paper thanking everybody involved and expressing how satisfied they were. So I felt it's appropriate to bring to the board today for us to pass comment on and review.
Thank you, Tricia. Well, of course, we as a board are very committed to experiencing the service that we offer our patients firsthand through listening to calls. This is unusual, really. I mean, normally we're looking for things, we're quite often looking at things which we think we could do better. It's very nice to have the opportunity to listen to something which really met the bill. I don't know if anybody had any comments on it. Yeah. You missed a gem there, Trevor, is all I can say. Peter?
Yeah. Well, I think certainly the call handlers end of the call, I think was, I was going to say cool. The word is calm. Cool. I wrote very calm actually, and yet positive and reassuring all the way through. And where she was dealing with the husband, of course, who so it was the third hand, but you could hear the conversation going on between the husband and the wife. But the call handler went through the process, although it's quite long-winded, in a thorough way, which if I was on the sharp end of this, would have really been both helpful and reassuring, and in particular where you might have a panicky husband who was really not quite sure of what was going on and where he was. So all of that I thought was really excellent. The sort of plan that she put into place was a bit like the plan the nurse gave as well, but that's good because that was good reassurance there. And also the fact that the callback arrangement for saying, well, it should be about 20 minutes. She actually indicated how long it might be, and if there was any problems, that of course you can always get back to us pretty much straight away. So I thought that was a really good tone as well. It was the tone of the voice that impressed me, how she kept that on all the time, and very good indeed. The nurse again was in a similar mode, I felt, but she made sure she spoke directly to the patient, and I thought that was really good the way she did that. She sort of got that sorted pretty quickly, and she went through a very thorough medical history, and again ensured that there was a plan in place to deal with the immediacy of the patient's needs. As I said, calm, steady. Cara even got into, which I'd never thought of myself, but then I'm not a nurse advisor, about pregnancy and things like that, which she handled extremely well, thoroughly. I note the point that you make about her saying, "Oh, you're lucky to live in Halifax." She might get a doctor calling out, but it was done in a way which I don't think had any side to it. Which, so there we are. So all in all, I thought this was a really a good experience, and both on the non-clinical and clinical side, handled very well, and I can see why they felt very satisfied with it, because for both of them it must have been a very difficult moment, but also very reassuring, because if they had all those things on their mind, about going for a child and acute kidney problem, something that's been going on all this woman's life, then they needed that sort of reassurance, and they got it.
Thank you, Peter. Sue?
Yeah, it was a pleasure listening to everybody. I suppose the only thing I would highlight is the comparison between the 0845 and the NHS 111 service.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem that much, but the difference is in the urgency of the referral to the FAPE, and the pressure that the 111 service would have been under as a result of a 0 to 2 hours referral rather than a 0 to 6, isn't it? So, okay, it's not self-care. She obviously needed to see somebody, but under the 0845, she got an excellent service and an appropriate clinical outcome, which didn't put unnecessary pressure on the out-of-hours service.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Good point.
Very good point there. Anyone else would like to make a comment? Tim?
Yeah, thank you. It was great, actually, wasn't it? I think the one observation is the callback worked very, very well. So, I mean, with 111, it's designed to avoid callbacks. Are they such a bad thing? Is a question that sort of remains in my mind. And maybe I should. So I think that's just an observation rather than a comment. And the other thing is, it's great for everybody living in Halifax. But what would have happened if I'd been living in Derby?
Well, the point the nurse was referring to was in most other areas, the patient makes their way to a clinic, to a GP out-of-hours centre, and is assessed in a clinical environment, where within this particular location, the out-of-hours provider only does home visits. So they, rather than have a location where patients come into, they just do all of their out-of-hours care by visiting the patient in their own home.
And this lady was obviously in some discomfort, wasn't she?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think she would have liked to have been bundled into a car. But I have no evidence to say that, actually, so I better stop. But thank you for that.
Alan?
Just got one point, and maybe it's a reflection on how different people would perceive the same call. And I don't want to go over things that everybody has already gone over, and I agree with the vast majority of it. I was a little bit surprised that at 3 o'clock in the morning the patient was offered sort of prophylactic information about how to avoid repeated occurrences of cystitis. Sort of that probably lasted for a minute and a half or so, and I'm kind of thinking at 3 o'clock in the morning, if I was in considerable pain, which the patient certainly sounded as if she was, I'm not sure I would have particularly welcomed that. But obviously the patient and her husband reported back, level 5 scores on everything, so they were obviously pleased themselves with the outcome. I'm not sure I would have been quite so sanguine about it myself, that's all.
Yeah, that's an interesting point too. I can't help but agree with that.
On the same point, the thought that crossed my mind is that there's no half delay for some other caller. It wasn't really terribly useful in the immediate context of what we're set out to do in the 845 service, but was nevertheless a very good clinical interaction.
Yeah, it does go to show how very subtle some of these things are, and what's appropriate at 3 o'clock in the afternoon with exactly the same patient, with exactly the same, might not be appropriate at 3 o'clock in the morning, and how very difficult it is to systematise that. It's interesting. Thank you, everyone. Very good. Thanks, Tricia, and really rewarding to hear that kind of for example. Okay, so I wonder whether you might bear with us while we just quickly try and dial into our medical director again. So we'll just give this one go, shall we, Keisha? And the next item on our agenda will be the palliative care service quality review.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Keisha.
Brian, welcome back. We're just about to look at the palliative care quality review. Trish, would you like to introduce this for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. This service quality review is the 8th in a programme of 10 reviews we agreed to undertake. The working group established came across from a whole diverse group of people to contribute to this paper. NHS Direct has one single palliative care service through the West Yorkshire Urgent Care, but I'll remind board members that we sometimes do receive palliative care patients both through our core service and through other commissioned services we undertake for PCTs and GP out of hours services. So the review, I believe, provides the board with assurance of the quality of the palliative care service that we offer, and does make some recommendations on some issues that would positively contribute to the delivery of a higher quality service and benefit some patient experience. And just to conclude, as Sue reported from the Clinical Governance Committee, the whole review of the actions both from this service quality review and all of the other service quality reviews to date are going through our comprehensive review of the action plan that's come out of the reviews to date as well.
Thanks very much, Tricia. I would like to sort of step out of the chair and make a comment. Is there anyone else who wants to? Okay, well let me kick off then. It's always good to see a quality review paper. I have a question around the complaints issue. You might help me understand it. So on page 18, we talk about 25 complaints in 2010-11. So 25, and the denominator I think is 400 calls a month in palliative care. Now, I think that gives you a so when we report complaints in the core service, our standard metric that we seem to be achieving is 0.3 complaints for every 10,000 calls. I think the comparator is something like 200 per 10,000 for this palliative care line, if I've done my maths right, which is a really striking discrepancy. And if I read that paragraph 4.1.1 or the following paragraphs carefully, I think I'm also hearing on page 18 that would be the number of complaints of people who've called in directly on the palliative care line, on the right number. And actually we're more concerned about the quality of those palliative care calls that are outside of the number, that go into the 0845. And we have greater concerns about the service we're able to offer. So could you help me understand why, am I right in thinking that the frequency of complaints in the palliative care is about 200 for 10,000 compared with 0.3 on 0845, and if so, why that would be the case?
I will have to check that point for clarity, Chair. I wouldn't wish to say it was a definitive answer.
And did you look at did the team look at the reasons for the complaints? What were the themes emerging?
The themes have been described actually within the paper where it was where there was complaints regarding the whole of the service that was delivered for palliative care. So if, for example, a GP didn't visit in the timescale they anticipated, or the district nurse hadn't come, then through the palliative care service number, the complaint has been registered, so we document that and register it within our service as a complaint, though it is not necessarily a complaint about our portion of the service that has been delivered.
Because one can imagine that they're people with who have complex needs and are receiving complex packages of care, and there's multiple opportunities for things to go wrong. And what you're saying is we provide a number where people are able to register problems that they're having with their overall palliative care service.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's much clearer for me. Thank you. Louisa?
Yeah, because there's some ambiguity, because we say here the majority of complaints originate from health professional feedback. I don't know what that means.
That will be district nurses ringing through to the number and complaining about how the referral's been received, or the timescale in which the service was received.
So it's from health professionals?
Yes.
So would health professionals be using our number to register dissatisfaction with stuff that had nothing to do with us? Because sorry, that was where I got to a moment ago. That people were ringing our number to say that there's some problem with the palliative care package in relation to something that had nothing to do with NHS Direct. But would a health professional do the same thing?
They are ringing through to a palliative care service. So yes, if somewhere within that patient's care delivery there was an issue, that health professional will still register that for us to be able to address through the clinical governance process in feeding back to commissioners. This was an issue. We collate all of that information and feed it back.
Louisa?
I think I probably still don't completely understand. And I think these papers are always quite difficult, aren't they? Because there are loads of people feed in everything.
Yeah.
And I suppose what would have helped me early on is to have seen a very clear description of what the service is, even to an extent of what a typical, maybe there is a typical, but what a call might be like. And I thought that would have been quite helpful, because I think I'm not sure what goes on in this, who's calling this line.
Yeah. Can I make a suggestion? Can we have palliative care calls on our call recordings next time around?
Yeah.
So I think that's what we try and do. We try and make the link between what we're listening to and could I just ask for a bit more help on the what is it that people are complaining about?
I'll take that.
Whether it relates to our service or whether, because it seems to me that when you're looking at a service, having a real understanding of the substance of what's going wrong is immensely valuable, and it's not just valuable to us in relation to improving our service, but it's valuable to the system overall. Lisa?
So, I don't think, maybe I should have known this, but I don't think I really knew that there was this service, and probably like other people here, there have been times when I've been involved in looking after somebody. If I'd had a number like this, I would have been definitely on the phone. It's an incredibly important service. So it would have been good to have had, as I said, a sort of clearer description of what it does. Then it seemed to me that it didn't seem that there were that many calls. So 400 for the area. Is that? How many people could potentially use it? I suppose was one of my questions.
Within the paper, it does describe there is a referral process to go on board to the palliative care line package, and that referral comes from a GP or from a district nurse or a palliative care nurse. So they nominate, depending on the stage of the illness the patient is in, as to when they access this level of service, and then they share the equivalent of a special patient note with us as the holding organisation as to diagnosis, the stage of the patient's condition, the current treatment they are receiving. So 400 would be the number of patients within that geographical location who met the service requirements of that palliative care
so
service.
we're confident that people are using the service and it's widely used.
Okay, let me just build on that a little bit. So I would suggest that we have next time a couple of representative palliative care calls, that we have something on what was the substance in the themes arising out of complaints. What is it that is actually going on in this service? And we have some data on epidemiologically, how many people would there be in the area covered who are who might be eligible for palliative care or might be receiving palliative care, and how many of those are registered with the service. Because I don't think, Tricia, correct me if I'm wrong, but 400 calls a month doesn't necessarily mean that there are 400 patients registered. So let's understand what's the potential population that we might be serving, people who are in need of palliative care or are receiving palliative care in that population. What proportion of those are registered with the service, and of those, what proportion actually call us?
Yeah.
And let's have some of that basic, and the description of the service, Louisa, that was another point that you made. Is there anything else you'd like to add into that?
There's just one more point, is that 5.1.3 talks about several pilots regarding end-of-life care registers around the country. I just wondered, and then consider having a named clinician engaging with sites, which may be at the front. I couldn't find it in the list of recommendations on the first pages.
Yeah,
I know we're incredibly stretched.
I'll clarify that point, Chair. My brief understanding is there are a number of palliative care services around the country which happen outside of our organisation. Some of those patients do happen to ring both our core service, and the recommendation is we make through a single clinician contact with those services, so we could share special patient notes and be able to stream their service similar to the West Yorkshire Urgent Care Palliative Care Service to those members and to those patients.
Sue, did you want to say something?
Can I just add, and apologies, Tricia, because you didn't pick it up in the Governance Committee. One of the other things that went through my head just now as we were talking was what happens under 111. We say that under 0845 we pick up calls, so I assume that under 111 we will as well. Is there anything in particular in Pathways that would change the experience?
I think maybe,
and not for now, but maybe it's part of the
that
for the next one.
explanatory paper around the actual calls could perhaps address that question too, as we tend to.
Yes,
actually,
we do normally. I just realised we haven't done it in this one. So.
We tend to on the call side. Okay, Alan.
Just very quickly, I was going to make a similar point to Sue's. I did a little bit of maths as well, and if that pattern of calling is representative, then that might be equivalent to about 350,000 calls per annum going through 111 of a palliative care nature. And so it's quite a large number of calls.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So I think Peter.
I just different area. I thought it was very helpful to pick up carers as people who need special attention in this process, and particularly on feedback. Certainly my knowledge would be that they would welcome that opportunity, and as part of the registering process it would be good that the carers are fully involved. I mean, I don't know quite how that works, but it's very often the carer that needs to take the initiative, and therefore some form of understanding of how engaged they are in the process would be helpful. And I was pleased to see, the online patient decision aid, although it apparently is for end-stage kidney disease, because it's an area which in long-term conditions, certainly in local government, where people are looking beyond the now to the long term. It's not an easy process, but the things you listed, like benefits, appointment of power of attorney, resuscitation and all that stuff, which is something which we culturally don't like to get into. And certainly there are helpful aids to moving, that are around written stuff which could help people perhaps understand what those issues are, because it goes way down into even deeper emotional difficulties of instructing people on your own thoughts on what might happen at the end of your life, and that's never easy to do. But it's a very good thing is that it opens that up for people. Particularly, I'm thinking of myself now, where I really don't like to think about it and think through, but thinking it through is actually very valuable. Painful it might be, but valuable.
I'm sure you're right, Peter. And in fact, Louisa's organisation has had a very interesting article and subsequent online debate around exactly those issues, starting at the Christmas.
Well, I think it's very valuable to open these things up. I really do.
It's a very good piece.
Anyway,
thank you.
Anyway, thank you.
Okay, so I think we found that very interesting, Tricia, and the measure of our interest is the number of questions which we then raise. So what's helpful is we've got a process by which that quite naturally comes together. Does anybody else want to make any comments before I move us on?
Just a very brief question about whether the patient's expectations or carer's expectations of a line which is billed to them and given to them as the palliative care line are actually unreasonably high for an organisation like ourselves. Whether that can be factored in.
I think that would be good to factor in. So I think that that under the sort of general heading of the description of the service, which we'd like to see, there are some issues about how does registration work, how care is involved, what expectations are set for patients. I mean, we do try to get patient consent for calls, don't we? And I can imagine this being quite challenging. If you have difficulty with that, Tricia, let us know. But ideally, we would like to, I'm sure, expect to follow the same process with these, so that we get to listen to calls which can help us understand the service that we provide and have proper consent.
So the last point is that it'd be interesting to know how many of the calls are made by carers. Because I can't seem to imagine that many patients make them.
Okay, very good. Thank you, everybody. That brings us